When my hero, Theodore Roosevelt, left the presidency, he went on an extended safari in Africa. If you read his hunting books in the West and in Africa, you'll see that he loves lever actions. So do I. He took an 1895 Winchester with him to Africa, chambered in the .405 cartridge, killed lions with it, said it was his big medicine. I'm going out in bear country in a couple of weeks and I'm taking a .45-70 with me. If you want to see my big medicine, hang around. Hello folks, Dick Fairburn here. About a week or so ago I posted a lever action home defense carbine video that so far is my biggest video. Seems pretty interesting to people. I love lever actions, I always have, used them extensively when I was doing cowboy action shooting. I mentioned in the other one I had Browning 1892 carbine in .357, and I showed you the big brother, which was the Browning 1886 chamber for .45-70. I think what will come through in the videos that I'm going to do for you, guns have never really been toys to me. I mean, I have more than I need, but to me, I'm going to keep a gun if I have a legitimate use for it. I needed guns while I was in the military. I needed guns for almost 40 years, carrying them as a cop. So they're more of a tool to me. I originally bought the Browning 1886 from a friend of mine in Wyoming. He had the rifle version, 26-inch octagon barrel. And he had some really hot loads worked up for it. I took it bear hunting a couple times, no bear showed up. It was really big, heavy to carry, so I traded it off to a friend. Found the carbine version, which is quite a bit lighter, it has a 22-inch round barrel, and that's this. My idea for this was to carry as a bear defense gun or a bear hunting gun if I got the chance to go after some big bears. Now, I killed a black bear in Wyoming a number of years ago. Didn't really have a desire to kill another black bear. But since 1988, when Yellowstone had the major fire, it pushed what was left of the grizzly population out into the wilderness areas of Wyoming, Idaho, Montana. They learned how to be bears again because for several generations they'd been living off of Yellowstone's garbage dumps. Once they found good food supplies and remembered how to be bears, the population has exploded. Where we used to bait for black bears, we commonly now get a lot of grizzly showing up in Wyoming. And my friend still actively bear hunts every year. I think he's killed all he wants, but he puts the baits out to bring friends in and give them the opportunity to take a nice black bear in Wyoming. So this spring, it's a couple weeks from today, I'm headed to Wyoming on a bear hunt. But I'm not going to hunt with a gun, I'm going to hunt with the video camera. Because he has 5 years of photos of trail camera pictures on one of his baits where a absolutely enormous grizzly bear has shown up each year for 5 years running. So the hunt I'm going on is a photo hunt. But this bear's huge. We're going to be in a ground blind between 50 and 100 yards away. If the wind is wrong and he has a bad attitude, I don't really want to be what comes out the back end of a bear. So I'm going to take big medicine with me in case the bear doesn't like me. .45-70 was really why I bought this carbine and put it together in the first place. I'll show you in a little bit. I'll give you some details of the sights that I put on here. This is a Williams receiver sight. I have a front sight from XS Outdoors, and it's a pretty good combination. My eyes are getting old, well over 60. I don't use open sights as well as I used to, but I do well enough. I've got some decent groups out of this. I'm not going to bore you with the details of sighting this carbine in, but I will show you the loads that I'm going to use and how I've got this thing set up. I'll be wearing a bear pistol as well on a chest rig, and I'll show that to you, and I'll show you examples that I've used over the years and things that I think are viable for bear defense with a handgun. And trust me, it's not going to be a 500 Smith & Wesson hand cannon, because I don't think you can knock a bear down simply from sheer raw power. I think you have to knock a bear down with precision. You have to hit the brain of the central nervous system. And that means you need a hard, deep penetrating bullet that does not have to be super powerful. That's my philosophy. And that's based on talking to some people who have put bears down with handguns. So here we go. I'm going to sight this rifle at maximum point blank range, which means I'm going to sight it to be about, it's going to be sighted zero at about 125 yards. That will give me a trajectory that's going to put it no more than 2.5 inches high or low from the muzzle to about 150 yards. And I think 150 yards is pretty much maximum range with a 45-70. I will show you a range table of the trajectory, and it looks a lot like a rainbow. It falls off pretty fast. Probably this is going to be a 25 to 50 yard rifle for most of my use, but I wanted the ability to reach out a little bit further if I could. Illinois adopted the straight wall rifle case rule for deer hunting here. 45-70 is one of the cartridges that will work for that. So I may decide to give it a try one of these days. I'm learning about YouTube as I go along, and one of the things I have not been doing that I guess I need to do is to ask you to please subscribe, give me the thumbs up, the like, and ring the little bell if you think I'm giving you good content. I'd like to grow this into a channel that can give you some really good content related to guns and hunting, and that's what I need to do it. So appreciate it if you could subscribe. Okay, here are the 4 types of ammo that I have considered as my bear defense load. These 2 are factory ammo. This is a 300 grain hollow point. It's available from several different manufacturers. I believe this happens to be a Remington. It's a light load. Both of these factory loads are safe in a trapdoor Springfield, so they meet SAMI specs. They are very light loaded. A strong action like a Marlin 95 or the Browning 8 or Winchester 86, you can load them up way beyond that if you think you need that power. So 300 hollow point, if you're going to shoot deer or something, perhaps a black bear, that might be my choice. The 405 soft point is, again, very lightly loaded. Depending on the barrel length, you may only get in the 12 to barely 1,300 feet per second range with this load. However, the jacket is thin, the lead is soft. They tend to mushroom well at that velocity, and they have a pretty good stopping power record, even as a lightly loaded factory round. What I intended to build up as my bear load is this one. This uses a Beartooth Bullets heat-treated cast lead bullet. It is in their WFN or wide flat nose configuration. They have 2 of these in 458 diameter, or 459, whatever your rifle might need. This is a 425 grain. You can see the base of the bullet is about there. They also have a 525 grain pile driver. Lower velocity, but a lot more penetration. The wide flat nose imparts a lot of damage as it goes through tissue. And the penetration is second to none. The penetration is just amazing with these hard cast loads. They will not expand. Although there is a trick, there's a way to de-heat treat the nose and make it like a soft point. You'll have to find that on the Beartooth Bullets website, if it's still up. It's my understanding Beartooth Bullets is out of business now. There are other companies making heat-treated cast bullets in that kind of configuration. They're often loaded to 1,600 to 1,800 feet per second with that load, as opposed to 1,200 or 1,300 for the factory 405. They've been taken to Africa, and they've killed everything over there. Certainly, they're going to stop anything on the North American continent. To do this, I would have to load this load to 1,600 to 1,800 feet per second. That's the main reason I put a recoil pad on that rifle. They shoot pretty good. That was going to be my bear load until my friend Jeff Hoffman at Black Hills Ammunition sent me some of these. This uses the Lehigh Defense FTM bullet. That stands for Fluid Transfer Monolithic. This is a solid piece of copper machined with these flutes. When it hits, the tissue that it goes through tends to liquefy, and that liquid is funneled through these flutes and shoots out these tips like cutting points. So this thing will do the damage of a soft point or hollow point for the first 8, 10, 12 inches of the penetration through an animal. But because they don't deform, because they're solid copper, they also penetrate like crazy. So this is loaded to SAMI specs. He says this is safe in an old trapdoor Springfield rifle. So it's a powder puff load in the 1886 or the Browning or the Marlin 95. Either one of those would handle way more velocity and pressure than this load. But it does the damage of the soft point for the first few inches. Then it penetrates like that hard cast heat treat bullet does. I will put the ballistic gelatin shot results of this load. It does massive damage up front, but penetrates over 30 inches. There's no reason you couldn't go to Africa and kill Cape buffalo or elephant with this load. So I think this is my new choice for bear defense in Wyoming. I'm going to get that shock effect up close. It's going to penetrate well through any creature that's out there. It's light, it's easy to shoot, and within the limits of my eyesight, I think it's pretty darn accurate. So that's my load for the Wyoming bear trip. Here's my Browning 1886 carbine, 4570. I bought it used. It had a couple of little rust spots on it. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. And it's a great using gun. That's how I like my guns. I'm not very good with mid-barrel sights. This one had a semi-buckhorn and a ladder that you could take it up to extended ranges. Probably not something I'm ever going to use. So I took that out. I filled the slot with a little fold-down sight, just so the dovetail wasn't sitting there empty. I mounted a Williams receiver sight. Rifle's already drilled and tapped for these. It just screws right on. They're solid sights. They're not very expensive. And they have a screw-in aperture. This one has a little brass ring in there to kind of catch the light at night. But if you're getting into dim conditions, what you really want to do is take that aperture out. And then as you see, you have a very large ghost ring aperture that can be both fast and accurate for any kind of shooting you need to accomplish. These things are a little tricky to sight in, and I'll go through that sight-in procedure for you. The front sight on this rifle is from a company called XS. And as you see, this does not have a traditional ramp and dovetail. Most of these carbines had this odd little square lug, kind of, I don't know if it's brazed or welded onto the top of the barrel, with a fore and aft slot. So XS made some replacement blades. The original that came with it was black and thin, rather narrow to see. This is wider, and it's got that white line up and down the center that makes it pretty easy to see under almost any light condition. So this is a good combination of that flat top front sight with an aperture rear sight. You have both speed and accuracy. Brownings traditionally come with a high gloss finish, which some of us don't like. I took the furniture off this rifle. I took to a furniture shop that does chemical stripping of the finish. Took that polyurethane finish off very nicely, and I rubbed in about 10 coats of True Oil. So I got a really nice, hard, semi-satin, weather-resistant finish. The finger lever has kind of got some sharp edges on it. I could have stoned those down and tried to re-blue it, but instead I just wrapped it with a little piece of leather, and that protects your fingers from any wear. The one sin I did commit on this rifle is when I had the stock done, I cut about an inch off the buttstock. Collectors cringe when you do things like that. But I mounted a 1-inch thick limb saver recoil pad, and those recoil pads really soak up a lot of energy in a hard kicking rifle. So then my buddy out west made me this really nice leather butt cuff. Covers up the pad, makes it look a little bit more Western, and I have 4 extra rounds. There's a specific way that you need to sight in these Williams foolproof sights. One criticism I have of them, the elevation screw and then over here the windage screw, they don't have an arrow or a mark to tell you which direction is which. So I looked it up on their website. I just put it on there with a silver Sharpie for now. It's not going to last, but once I get this locked down, I'll probably hardly ever move it. On the left side over here, this screw is actually a wedge. This up and down piece is a dovetail, and that screws a wedge in against it and locks it physically up and down and sideways. It locks down all movement. So the first thing you need to do when you're going to move your sights is you need to unlock that wedge. Then you come up here and there are 2 small set screws on the windage and elevation adjustment knobs. So you back those out a good half turn or so, just so they're free to move. For elevation, you're going to turn clockwise if you need to go down. And there are clicks. It'll click into place, so it's not just a by guess and by golly. My best guess on this particular rifle, this sight radius, is that each click is roughly going to be about a half minute of angle. So it's going to move your group about a half inch at 100 yards. At a quarter, at 50 yards, it's going to be half that value. At 25 yards, it's going to be a fourth of that value. Then you have to do a lot more clicks to make it move. So unlock the wedge, unlock the locking screws. Elevation down is clockwise. Your windage screw is over here. Clockwise moves it left. So make your adjustments. Lock down these to lock your elevation and windage screws, and then tighten down your wedge to lock this thing very solidly in place. And you need to go through those steps every time you make an adjustment. Unlock the wedge, unlock the locking screws, make your elevation and windage adjustments, and then lock everything back down. If you don't lock it down, the sight can kind of wiggle around on you as you're shooting it. And that was a lesson I had to relearn. I haven't used a Williams sight for quite a few years. I had one 30 years ago. I forgot that you had to lock everything down. So I wasted a few rounds chasing myself. Once I remembered I had to do that, then it sighted in pretty well. I think I mentioned earlier, this is sighted for, roughly it's sighted for 125 yards. I do that at the 100-yard line, which means I need to be about 2 inches high, not about, it needs to be exactly 2 inches above point of aim at 100 yards. That puts it on that 125-yard zero curve. And to show you the drop rate, I'll show you the ballistic printout. It's 0 to 125 yards. That means it's too high at 100. It's dropped 2 inches to 125 zero. And by the time you get to 150, it's dropped 2.5 more inches. It's 2.5 low at 150 yards. So this is anything but a flat shooting rifle. Okay, here's the range table I have alluded to in this video. 4570, I'm using Black Hills Ammunition's Honey Badger load. It's a 325 grain FTM, Fluid Transfer Monolithic Bullet, by Lehigh Defense. Browning 1886 carbine. It's got a 22-inch barrel. When I chronographed this load, it came in at around 1780 feet per second with a 22-inch barrel. I use JBM. It's a free trajectory system on the internet that you can use. And I calculated out that I wanted a point-blank range of no more than 2.5 inches. In other words, I would accept the bullet being no more than 2.5 inches high or 2.5 inches low, and then see what kind of distance I can get off that. That's a 5-inch circle. That means all of my shots will fall within a 5-inch circle from 0 to the maximum point-blank range, which in this case happens to be 150 yards. It's 2.5 inches low. This is a little bit within that because it never really peaks out at 2.5. It only gets up to about 2.2. But the trajectory of this is so bad that you don't really gain. You might gain 5 yards if you made a slight adjustment there. But playing around with those numbers, what it came out with was a zero of about 125 yards. I don't have to zero it at 125 yards. You can zero it at 100, at 50, within some margin of error, even at 25. But you have to hit these numbers exactly at those distances to get you on that curve. So at 100 yards, I ended up being 1.5 inches high, 1.5 to 1.6. That's as close as you're going to get with the kind of adjustments the sights have. So I can use this from 0 to 150 yards. I don't intend on shooting that far out, but I can if I've got a solid rest. One thing to pay attention to here is the windage. Look how much wind moves this big heavy bullet. You would think the big heavy bullet would want to track straight. But at 100 yards, a 10 mile per hour full value wind is going to blow this thing over 2 inches left or right. If we happen to shoot out to 150, a 10 mile an hour wind is going to move at 5 inches. So it's going to have to be allowed for. You're going to have to take that into consideration. This shows your velocity drop. This shows your energy drop. I don't pay attention to energy. I'm convinced that energy doesn't really have anything to do with wounding power. All it can do really is compare the two different loads and see if they're generating similar energies. So even with this very short range rifle of 45-70, you can still reach out to 150 yards with not worrying about holdover at all. If I feel like I want to hit something at 250 yards, I got to hold 2 feet high to lob that round in. Will it still do some damage out there? Yeah, it's heavy. It hurts if you drop it on your foot. But you're really starting to run out of steam. But within that 100-yard range, we'll say 125 yards, I think that bullet will take down virtually anything on the North American continent. Okay, we got them both here now. You ready? Bud got one. Ginger got one. Oh, she missed it. She usually gets them, doesn't she, Bud? Okay, girl, last one. You ready? You ready? Yeah! That's all there is till next time.